They tied her to the post like she was a mule, ankles bare, rope chafing her wrists, dust clinging to her skin like shame that wouldn't wash off. The town square was quiet, but not out of respect. This was the kind of silence people wore like a smirk, the kind that made even the wind hesitate. She stood still, chin down, shoulders squared. She didn't cry, didn't plead. She had learned long ago there was no kindness in begging, not in towns like this, not from people like them. Her mother, if she could still be called that, stood off to the side, half drunk and bitter, leaning against the saloon rail. Her voice slurred through the heat, loud enough for everyone to hear. She ain't worth much, but I'm tired of feeding her. Anyone wants her. Take her. Right now. No one moved. The auctioneer cleared his throat, wiped his brow, tried to make it sound like this was just business. Strong girl. Works quiet. Field or house. Doesn't talk back. Still, no one stepped forward. A few eyes lingered on the girl, then darted away. A shopkeeper chuckled behind his hand. Someone muttered about used goods. The crowd began to shift, not in interest, but in quiet, collective discomfort. The girl didn't look up. She was used to being invisible until someone needed something from her. Used to being seen and unseen at the same time. A body without a name. Then the silence changed. From the back of the crowd, a man stepped forward. He didn't speak right away. Just moved slow, steady, like someone who didn't need attention to carry weight. A broad frame under a worn brown coat, boots dusted from older roads, hat pulled low, a man made of time and quiet. He stopped near the crate, thumb hooked in his belt, and said, calm as if he were buying a sack of nails, "I'll take her." The auctioneer blinked. You'll take her?" The man nodded once. Her mother laughed, a sound more bark than breath. "She's yours, cowboy. Long as you take her today." The man didn't look at her. Not yet. He reached into his coat, pulled out a small pouch of coins, and handed it over. Not a fortune, not a bargain, just enough. Enough to end something. He stepped toward the girl, not too close, and pulled out a pocket knife. Slowly, carefully, he cut the rope at her wrists. She didn't flinch, didn't thank him, didn't meet his eyes. "You hurt?" he asked. She shook her head. "You got a name?" She didn't answer. He didn't press, just pointed toward the edge of town. "Wagon's waiting. You come or stay. Your choice." For a moment the world held still. Dust hovered in the sunlight. Breath caught in every chest. Then she moved, one step, then another. Her knees wobbled, but she didn't fall. And he didn't reach for her. He just turned and walked, and she followed, not because he pulled, because for the first time, someone let her choose, and she chose to walk. The trail to the ranch was long and mostly silent. Dust rose behind the mule wagon, curling like old ghosts in the golden light. The man didn't talk much. He handed her a canteen once, that was all. She didn't ask where they were going. She didn't ask anything at all. When they arrived, the sun was leaning low, painting everything in amber and shadow. The house stood tired but upright, wooden bones weathered and worn but not broken. A crooked oak guarded one side. The barn leaned like it had secrets to keep. "This is it," he said. She nodded, eyes flicking toward the porch steps, then the barn, then the sky. Everything looked like it could collapse, but it didn't. Inside, the house smelled of old cedar and faint smoke. No curtains, no lace, just floors that creaked and furniture too sturdy to be pretty. A single picture hung above the hearth, too faded to see. He pointed up the stairs. "Top of the steps, first room on the left." She carried nothing with her but the dust on her skin. That night, she lay on a bed that didn't lock her in. The sheets were rough but clean. She didn't close the door. He didn't either. Somewhere downstairs, a chair creaked once, then silence. The kind of silence that didn't press down, just waited. In the morning, he found her at the sink, washing the 2 mugs they'd used. She didn't turn when she said, "You don't have to thank me." He didn't. "You don't have to do it either." She shrugged. "I don't mind." They ate breakfast quietly. He didn't ask about where she came from. She didn't ask about who he lost. She noticed things, though. The way he fed the mule first thing, before himself. How he always said good night, even if she didn't reply. how his limp favored the right leg, and how he touched the fence post like it was something alive. He noticed her too, the way she winced when the wind slammed the door, how she peeled the crust off bread before eating, how she flinched just slightly at thunder, even when pretending not to. She swept the porch one afternoon, the broom snapped in her hands. He fixed it without a word and handed it back, handle bound tight with wire and care. That night, when the chill crept in through the windows, he draped a shawl over the stair rail. She found it in the morning, and though he never told her to wear it, she did. There were no rules here, no locked doors, no shouted orders or whispered threats, just space. He never touched her, never asked questions. He was there when she needed help and gone when she needed quiet. At first, that frightened her, but over time, it didn't. She began to hum when she cooked, not a song, just a sound that meant she was present, alive. She folded towels into neat squares like she used to when survival demanded control. But now, it was choice, not armor. He didn't praise, didn't interfere, just noticed. And slowly, so slowly it didn't feel like change, she began to notice something too. She no longer braced herself before every movement. She no longer counted exits. She no longer slept in a ball like she was still in a corner with a bolt on the outside. It wasn't safety she trusted, it was space. And in that space, under a roof too quiet to be empty, she started to remember what breath felt like when it wasn't borrowed. She was still afraid, but she was also free. She began to notice the little things first, the way he placed his boots side by the door every night, never haphazard, always precise, how he tapped the toe of the left one before stepping out like a ritual, the way he rubbed his knee when the cold rolled in, thumb circling the spot with quiet endurance, how he always stirred his coffee counterclockwise, how he never forgot to feed the mule, rain or shine, no matter what else the day took. None of it was loud. None of it was meant to be seen. And yet, she saw. In return, he noticed her too. He noticed how she jumped at thunder, even when pretending not to, how she'd press her lips tight and stare straight ahead, like bracing for an old blow from someone long gone, how she ate, carefully, always the smallest portion, never touching the last slice on the plate unless he insisted. He never asked about it, but he noticed. That was the difference. No one had ever noticed her unless it was to use her, or shame her, or tell her she was something small and unwanted, but here she could be quiet and still exist. It was the kind of noticing that didn't feel heavy, just real. One afternoon, she sat on the back steps, peeling apples for stew. He was mending a hinge on the barn door, close enough to hear her if she spoke, but far enough to leave her be. She watched him for a long time. The way he worked, not fast, not careless, just steady. The kind of man who did things right even if no one was watching. The words came out before she had time to soften them. "Why'd you take me?" He didn't stop hammering, didn't even turn around. "Because no one else did." She blinked. That was it. Not because he needed help, not because he pitied her, not because she was useful or pretty or owed, just because no one else had. That night she sat a little closer at supper. Not beside him, she wasn't ready for that, but close enough that their elbows might have brushed if the table were smaller. He didn't mention it, he just passed her the bread without her needing to ask. Later, when she climbed the stairs to her room, she paused halfway up, listened to him move through the kitchen, washing the tin mugs, heard the chair scrape the floor when he sat down to check the ledger. The fire crackled low in the hearth. It was the sound of a house being lived in, not endured. In the quiet of her room, she stared out the small window, moonlight spilling across the wooden floor. She thought about all the questions she had once screamed in her head. Why me? Why again? Why always like this? But this one, why did you take me, had an answer now. Because no one else did, and somehow that was enough. Not a promise, not a plan, just a truth that wasn't cruel. For the first time in her life, someone saw her drowning and didn't ask her to explain the water. The storm rolled in sudden and hard. One moment the sky was only gray and tired. The next, it broke open like a wound. Rain came down in sheets, not gentle but cleansing, as if the whole world had been holding its breath and finally exhaled. She was at the window when it started, watching the horizon darken. Thunder cracked far off. She didn't flinch this time. Not because she wasn't afraid, but because the fear felt smaller than something else inside her. She stepped outside. Barefoot on the porch, wind tugging her hair loose from its braid, she didn't hesitate. She walked into the downpour like it was calling her home. The cold bit into her arms, her neck, her spine. Her dress clung to her frame in seconds, but she didn't retreat, didn't shield herself. She tilted her face up toward the sky and let it fall. Let it soak her completely. Let it run over her shoulders and down her back like baptism, because something in her needed washing, not the dirt. Not the dust, but the weight. Behind her, the screen door creaked open. He stood on the porch, arms folded, just watching. No words, no judgment. He saw her, not a girl standing in the rain, but someone trying to climb out of something invisible, someone searching for the part of herself that hadn't been broken. She didn't cry. She just stood there, trembling but rooted. He stepped off the porch, moved slow, steady. No boots on, just socks, soaked within seconds. He didn't call her name. He didn't even know it. He didn't try to pull her back. Instead, he reached out and gently draped his coat over her shoulders. It was heavy with his warmth and his silence. She didn't say thank you. She didn't need to. She didn't move away, and he didn't step back. For a long moment, they stood together under the falling sky, her with eyes closed, him with eyes open. And it was the first time they truly saw each other, not in the way people glance. Not in the way people judge, but in the way that memory sees pain mirrored in another person's posture. She didn't know what had broken him. He didn't know all the ways she'd been shattered. But somehow, in the rain, none of that mattered, because neither of them turned away. Later, they returned inside without speaking. The fire was low. The house was quiet again. The storm raged outside, but in the small warmth of the kitchen, something softer settled. She left the coat on for a while, even as it dripped on the floor. When she finally looked at him, really looked, his eyes were already there, steady and unflinching, not asking, not expecting, just present. And for the first time in her life, being seen didn't feel like a threat. It felt like relief. I didn't buy you. I ended it. The whispers found their way back to town before she did. The auction girl, they said. She's still out there, living with that rancher. Can you believe it? No one ever said her name. They didn't care to know it. Names were for people you saw as human. She was still just the girl someone bought. A week after the rain, a man came riding up the long dirt path to the ranch house, dust on his boots, too much grin in his voice. He knocked like he belonged. The rancher opened the door. The man tipped his hat, eyes scanning the space behind him. Heard you got someone staying here. Thought maybe I'd take her off your hands if the price is fair. The air went still. The rancher didn't flinch, didn't curse. He just stood a little taller. She's under my roof, he said. You'll leave now. The other man blinked, tried to laugh it off. Didn't mean nothing. Just an offer. The door closed before he could finish. That night, the girl sat by the fire, hands folded tightly in her lap. She hadn't asked about the visitor. She didn't have to. He was washing the dishes when she finally spoke. You know what they say about me? He didn't look up. I've heard worse. She stared at the floorboards. They're not wrong. He turned off the tap. She kept going. Not because she wanted to, but because if she didn't say it now, it would fester. I was 15 the first time my mother sold me, she whispered. She told me I was old enough. That softness didn't feed you, and this world didn't spare girls who stayed clean. Her voice didn't shake, not anymore. It was too tired for shaking. She took the coin. I didn't fight, not at first, but I tried later, tried to run. They caught me. Locked me up in a shed. No food, no water. 3 days. She took a breath. When they let me out, I didn't run again. I stopped counting after the 6th man. The fire cracked. The room stayed warm. Still. She looked up, waiting for him to shift, to recoil, to pity, to leave. But he didn't. He dried his hands, walked over, and sat down across from her. I didn't buy you, he said. You paid coin. I paid to end something, not to own you, not to claim you, to cut the rope, not tie a new one. She stared at him like he was speaking a language no one had ever used with her. He met her eyes, not with shame, not with rescue, just with truth. I didn't know your story, he said. Still don't, but I saw the way they looked at you in that square, like you were already written. Like you didn't get to change your ending. He leaned back. I think you do. She didn't respond, didn't have the words, but something shifted in her chest, not like a door opening, more like a window cracking after being painted shut for years. And later that night, when the wind howled through the rafters, she didn't sleep with her back to the wall. For the first time, she faced the door. The days got longer, warmer. The wind softened and the fields filled with the... She'd been sleeping easier, eating more. But one morning she woke before dawn with her heart pounding. It wasn't a nightmare that startled her. It was the stillness, the cow. She packed her satchel in silence, just a few things. The shawl, a piece of bread, the mended apron, nothing that would be missed, nothing that would hurt to Lee. When the sky turned lavender, she stepped out onto the porch. He was already hitching the mule. I need to go, she said. He didn't turn, just tied the last knot on the harness. I figured. She blinked. You're not going to stop me? No, he said. Needing to go means you haven't chosen to stay. I won't take that from you. He helped her up into the wagon without a word, handed her the reins. The mule didn't move. She clicked her tongue, nudged with her boot, tugged the reins again. Still nothing. He watched, calm as ever. You got a stubborn one, she muttered, embarrassed. He shook his head gently. He's not stubborn. He's just honest. She frowned. What's that supposed to mean? He walked to the mule, placed a hand on its neck. Animals know. They carry what you give them. He knows you're not really leaving. She looked down at her hands, gripping leather like it might turn into wings. I thought leaving meant freedom, she said. Sometimes it does. And sometimes freedom means staying without being asked to. She swallowed hard. Her chest ached in that strange, silent way, like it wasn't breaking, but remembering how it once did. I'm scared, she admitted. He nodded. Me too. I don't know how to stay. Not really. You learn. She sat there, reins in hand, staring at the road that had once promised escape, but it didn't shimmer anymore. It just looked like dirt. Slowly, she climbed down, walked back toward him, the satchel still slung over her shoulder. What if I stayed? She asked, voice barely a whisper. He didn't answer right away. Then I'd have to build a new fence line. She blinked. Why? He gave the faintest smile. Because it wouldn't be just my land anymore. Her throat tightened. She stepped closer. Would I be your wife? She asked. Not unless you wanted to be. What if I don't know how to be one? Then we figure it out. He reached out, not to pull, not to claim, but to offer, an open hand. For a long second, she stared at it. Then she placed hers in his. They didn't kiss. They didn't cry. But later that evening, when the sun dipped low behind the ridge, they stood by the creek behind the house. Just them, no preacher, no witnesses, only the wind and the steady hush of water. You sure? He asked one last time. She nodded. I'm not clean, she whispered. Not new. I'm not asking for either. I'm only learning how to be good. He looked at her gently. I'd be afraid of anyone who thought they already were. That night, she pulled the scarf from her satchel, the one her mother gave her, soaked in memory, and fed it to the fire. She didn't flinch as it burned. When he handed her a chair on the porch, sanded smooth just that morning, she sat in it without apology. And for the first time, she wasn't someone who stayed because she had nowhere to go. She stayed because she chose to. The house didn't change overnight, but it began to breathe, not loudly, not with the kind of joy that comes easy, but with slow, honest exhales, like bones settling after a long ache. They repaired the porch first. He showed her how to pull old nails without splintering the wood. She taught him how to hem curtains, fingers moving like they remembered something tender. He chopped wood at dusk. She watered the garden at dawn. They spoke little, but they no longer needed to fill the silence. Because the silence itself had changed. It wasn't hiding anymore. It was holding. She swept the floors in wide, thoughtful strokes, cooked without rushing, started humming again, not out of habit, but peace. One morning she took down the broken curtain in the kitchen and replaced it with something stitched by hand. Nothing fancy, just pale blue linen with tiny seams, careful and clean. He didn't say anything about it, but she caught him looking at it that night, quietly. They learned each other like you learn weather, slowly, cautiously, by noticing what stays after the storm. She watched how he tapped every nail twice before driving it in, how he mumbled to the mule like it could understand, how he set his boots side by side at the door, always facing out, ready to leave but never planning to. He noticed how she peeled potatoes without waste, how she folded her apron like it was silk, how she touched the windowsill sometimes like making sure it was still there. One afternoon, she found a box on the kitchen windowsill, sanded smooth, no latch, no decoration. Inside, a single dried wildflower, pressed flat, a pale blue ribbon, frayed at one end. A folded note written in careful, clumsy script. You are not what they named you. You are what you survived and what you chose. She stared at the words for a long time. Then she pressed the note to her chest, sat down on the floor and cried, not from pain, not even from sorrow, but from recognition, because no one had ever told her she was more than what had happened to her. That night she didn't speak during supper, but she placed the box in the middle of the table between them. He didn't reach for it, didn't explain, but she knew he'd built it, knew he'd written the words, and that was enough. The next day, a neighbor came by, a woman from town, someone who once looked too long, spoke too low. She brought a jar of preserves and shifted nervously on the porch. My niece's christening's coming up, the woman said. Thought maybe you might be willing to help stitch a gown? The girl didn't flinch. She didn't look to the man for permission. She didn't nod politely like she used to. She said, I'd be honored. And just like that, the world shifted again. Not loudly, but enough. The days grew shorter. The air tasted faintly of apples and wind. Evenings arrived sooner now, pressing golden light against the walls before giving way to dusk. She sat barefoot on the porch one afternoon, ankles tucked beneath the hem of her skirt, her feet resting on the rail like she'd always belonged there. The shawl he'd given her, once a shield, now draped loose around her shoulders like second skin, worn with ease, with claim. He came to sit beside her without a word. They watched the sky together, wide and bruised with coming night, the wind pulling slow through the tall grass. After a long silence, she said, I don't think I could go back. He didn't look at her. To town? No, she said softer. To who I was. The words hung in the air, delicate and whole, the kind that break only when someone tries to fix them. You don't need to, he said. She nodded, eyes on the horizon. I buried her. He didn't ask where, didn't ask when, just let the moment settle. I didn't even say goodbye, she added. He reached down, brushed a twig from the porch floor. Some goodbyes don't need saying. They sat until the sun dipped low and everything turned to firelight and shadow. That night, they lay side by side, not touching, but not apart. She stared at the ceiling, at the cracks that looked like rivers if you followed them long enough. And then, in a voice nearly lost to the dark, she whispered, I've never felt safe before. Not really. He answered without opening his eyes. That's what a home is. She turned toward him, heart thrumming, not in fear, but in awe. I think I love this house, she said. And it was true, not because of the walls or the roof or the chair she sat in each evening, but because within these quiet halls her name had changed shape. Her worth had been returned, not all at once, but piece by trembling piece. The house, like her, had once held too many ghosts. Now it held breath. Welcome home. They returned to town on a quiet Tuesday, not for seed, not for flour, not because they had to, but because they wanted a piece of paper that said what their hands and hearts had already chosen. Marriage, no guests, no preacher, just ink and breath, and the steady beat of hooves on dirt road. He wore his cleanest shirt. She wore her apron still damp from morning chores and a ribbon in her hair she hadn't worn in years. He didn't comment, just offered her a hand to help down from the wagon. The clerk barely looked up when they stepped inside. You here for a license or a witness? A signature, the rancher said. Ours. The clerk blinked, then pulled the papers. She wrote her name carefully, paused over the line like it might disappear beneath her, but it didn't. She signed. He followed. When it was done, they didn't kiss, didn't smile wide or hold hands like the story said they should. But when they stepped outside, she leaned against his shoulder, not out of fear, not out of need, but because she could. The wind was warm that day. Dust curled lazily under the wagon wheels. No one shouted, no one stared. A few faces turned their way, but not with judgment, just quiet acknowledgement. They rode home without hurry. At the porch, he helped her down again. This time, she didn't rush up the steps. She paused, looked at the house, really looked, at the faded wood, the fixed door, the worn path through the garden she'd planted with her own hands. And then she stepped inside. Barefoot, she touched the doorframe with her fingers, ran them across the wall like it was familiar skin, the table, the hearth, the shelf with the folded towels and the tin mugs. When she turned to him, he stood just inside, hat in hand, gaze soft but unsure. She met his eyes and said simply, "Welcome home." He blinked once, then answered, "It's yours too." Later that night, he did something she hadn't seen before. He took down the old photograph hanging above the fireplace, the one too faded to name, too silent to ignore. He didn't burn it, didn't hide it. He just placed it in a drawer, closed it gently, and left the wall bare. She didn't speak, but a few days later, she stitched a small cloth with two names side by side. No flowers, no lace, just one word beneath them, enough. She hung it on that wall. And for the first time, the house didn't feel like it was waiting for someone to come back. It felt like it had finally let go. Fall arrived soft and golden. The fields turned copper at the edges, and the air carried the scent of smoke and fruit wood. They canned peaches by the crate. She lined them neatly on the shelves he built just for that. He stacked firewood like it was a promise to survive winter together. Sometimes they argued about where to plant the kale, about how much salt belonged in stew, but the arguments never splintered. They were just weather passing through. That was the miracle. They no longer needed permission to take up space. She taught him to read cursive, slowly, by firelight, her finger underlining each curve. He taught her how to patch leather without tearing it further. They passed knowledge like bread across the table, without pride, without debt. Some evenings they sat on the porch and said nothing for hours. The sky stretched wide above them, soft with stars and the hum of crickets. She would rest her feet on the railing, shawl slipping down one shoulder. He'd offer no correction, just sat beside her, like he had always meant to. One morning she found a wooden box beside the bed. Inside, her name, carved, not the name others had used, not the ones full of ash and barter, just the name she had told him in the quiet once by the fire when she thought he was asleep. He had remembered, not just the sound of it, but the shape. Later that week, a woman from town stopped by again, not out of pity, but purpose. This time, she asked if the girl, the woman, might help with a harvest supper quilt. Nothing paid, just neighborly. She didn't nod. She smiled. "I'd be glad to." The girl who had once stood on a crate waiting to be claimed was now choosing what to hold and what to let go, and the world, in its own slow way, had started to see her not as the auction girl, but as a woman with a home and hands that mended. One evening, as the wind turned cold and the leaves whispered across the porch floor, he found her sitting with a blanket over her knees. She was smiling, but it wasn't bright or wide. It was steady. He sat beside her. After a while, she said, "I don't miss who I was, but I thought I'd mourn her longer." He didn't respond with words. He just reached over and placed his hand on hers. She laced their fingers together. They stayed like that until the sun dipped down and turned the whole world to copper and quiet. That night, they lay side by side. No ghosts, no past, just breath. She whispered, "I used to think survival meant being quiet." He answered, "Sometimes it does, but not here." "Not anymore," she said, and when morning came, she rose with it, not afraid, not apologetic. She stirred the fire, poured coffee into 2 tin mugs, and looked around the kitchen like it belonged to her. Because it did. Because she did. The house, once hollow, now echoed with laughter, soft, infrequent, but real. And if you passed by it today, just beyond the cottonwoods at the ridge, you'd see the porch light glowing, even at dusk. 2 chairs, always filled. And maybe, If the wind was right, you'd hear the floorboards sigh, not with sorrow, but with peace, because not everything broken needs fixing. Some things only need naming, and they had named this place home, together.